those things, isn't it? I mean, it seems so to me. I mean, everyone's in favor of massive spending and of shutting all the borders. I mean, I covered the migration crisis of 2015, firsthand. I traveled very widely across the continent and the continents people were coming from. And, in 2015, when hundreds of thousands of people were pouring into Europe illegally, I used to think, why isn't this able to be stopped? And people would tell me, you've got to understand, we live in a globalized world, and it's not possible to shut borders. This is simply the modern world. I remember one of the former French ministers saying to me, there's nothing that can be done. And so you can imagine that it's with a certain amount of, glee, I suppose, that I noticed people like Justin Trudeau shutting all the borders of Canada, having told us for years that, the open borders were just a thing that we all lived with and there were only upsides. And then the coronavirus comes along and it turns out even Justin Trudeau can shut the borders at a moment's notice. This happened across Europe. It's something that we were told wasn't possible with the immigration crisis, was certainly possible with the corona crisis. But there are lots of tensions in Europe that this has opened up. The most interesting, to my mind, is the North-South divide, which always goes on. One of the great, obviously, we in Britain have now left the European Union. It always seems to me slightly rude to criticize a club you've just resigned from. But some of us who were always critics of the EU used to say that the fundamental problem, particularly of monetary union, was the idea that you could meld German and Italian fiscal habits, or Greek and German bookkeeping. And, one of the fascinating tensions has just broken out again over this coronavirus, which is this North-South divide, where the South, once again, is absolutely at the brunt of the problem. I mean, it's Italy and Spain that first had the worst mortality figures in this virus. And having been lectured for years, as those countries were, by the North, telling them that there needed to be greater integration and a greater pooling of sovereignty, what happens when the coronavirus hits? But both France and Germany suddenly become completely protectionist over the export of masks, oxygen, and other necessities. And you can imagine, the Southern European countries, particularly Italy, looks at this, has been told for years that this is precisely the sort of the thing that the EU has been set up to avoid. And the two countries that lectured them hardest, France and Germany, turn out, when needed, to be just as nationalistic as the countries they had been attacking all of these years. Particularly Monsieur Macron and Chancellor Merkel have loved attacking people for being nationalists in Central and Eastern Europe, love attacking people for being protectionists in these countries. But it turns out that there is something which makes them do exactly the same and actually a lot.
We will make America great again.